It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Welcome to the Bad News Broadcast, the news that most don't want to know and that we all wish wasn't so. A plethora of breaking biosphere collapse headlines in a moment. But first, this question. What is the only known country that has never been a part of the global climate engineering weather warfare assault? Iran. And no, that isn't speculation. Iran has historically and repeatedly stated on the record that Western powers have been waging weather warfare against them for over 40 years by cutting off their rain, which of course destabilizes food production and thus populations. No surprise. And now, the renewed and very ramped up attack on oil-rich Iran, the non-participant in weather warfare Iran, justified by pushing the same rehashed propaganda that we were all force-fed about Iraq, the weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist. How many Americans will choose to care about the truth? How many will choose to keep their eyes wide shut? We were told no new wars. Really? Not so much. In the first year of this administration's second term, 7 countries bombed and counting. Iran, Iraq, Somalia, Yemen, Syria, Nigeria, and Venezuela. How about make America healthy again? Definitely not. Gutting environmental protection laws across the board and radically ramping up cancer-causing glyphosate production. Make America great again. How's that going so far? As we circle the drain toward a dead planet, with weather, chemical, and biological warfare raging in our skies, carried out by our own government and military. The powers that shouldn't be, aka the money printers, control it all. Government, matrix media, and military might, which again absolutely includes the weather warfare raging in our skies. The money printers pull the strings. Unfolding and accelerating biosphere collapse translates to total power structure desperation, exactly as Geoengineeringwatch.org has stated was coming on the record for over a decade and a half. Buckle up. Far worse is coming fast. The controllers are playing their cards. Political stripes are irrelevant in this equation. Both sides of the orchestrated political divide have always been beholden to the money-printing controllers. Moving on. Breaking biosphere collapse headlines. How bad is it? How many really want to know? Let's start with this. From the New York Times, we are only at the beginning of climate destabilization in which winter weather grows more erratic and extreme. Winter is one of the last threads holding everything in place. Again, from the New York Times. Let's stop there. Let's replay that statement from the New York Times. We are only at the beginning of climate destabilization in which winter weather grows more erratic and extreme. Yes, that statement is completely true, and with the caveat that we are actually already well into the curve, the unfolding and accelerating abrupt climate collapse is well underway. And next, what core component of this equation will the New York Times never admit to? The climate engineering, weather, chemical, biological warfare, atmospheric assault that only the hopelessly in denial or the clinically blind can't seem to see. How many are wondering where all the big, brilliant, puffy white cumulus clouds have gone? They're diminishing rapidly. Climate engineering operations are core to this extremely dire scenario. Both the atmospheric aerosol dispersions and the frequency transmissions used to manipulate the sprayed nanoparticles are core to this equation. I've done my best to sound the alarm on this unfolding natural cloud loss scenario for almost 2 decades, and we're now in advanced stages. The gravity of this existential threat can't be overstated. For those that are new to this broadcast, this is the path to what is known as Venus syndrome. The term is not a metaphor. The more radically the geoengineers ramp up their operations, the more damage is done to the planet's remaining life support systems, including cloud-producing processes. As natural heat-reflecting cumulus clouds continue to disappear, the faster the thermal energy buildup on Earth's surface takes place. For the weather terrorists, this loss of natural cloud cover is justification for even more expansive and aggressive climate engineering operations, which again, in turn, further damages and diminishes what is yet left of the planet's life support systems. Is this not the textbook definition of total insanity? Short answer, yes. And the bottom line regarding climate engineering is this: it was never benevolent. The weather, chemical, and biological warfare in our skies has always been and will always be about power and control. Bouncing back to so-called Winter Storm Herndon. A surprise winter hurricane is spawned out of nowhere and produces a conveyor of snow targeting the most densely populated regions of the U.S. Does nature manufacture flash snowstorms with moisture turned up from the record-warming ocean waters? No. Welcome to climate engineering, weather warfare, and chemical ice nucleation operations. More headlines. Exactly the kind the controllers and the climate engineers want. Quote, snow hurricane batters East Coast, leaving 2 dead and 500,000 without power, end quote. That's from the Daily Mail. And this, quote, East Coast blizzard bomb cyclone. Nor'easter hammering New York, New Jersey, Mid-Atlantic, and New England. That's from the Weather Channel. And this, quote, powerful winter storm slams U.S. Northeast as New York City issues travel ban. That's from BBC. Bottom line, buckle up. The weather terrorists have much more in store for us all. Wait and see. As the weather whiplash record heat warm-ups follow the flash freeze chemical cooldowns, the extreme hail events are again commencing. Baseball and softball size hail has become the new norm. Insurance companies are canceling hail damage coverage across the board. Moving on, yet more headlines from the previous week's completely engineered winter weather mayhem headlines. Winter Storm Hernando targeting the most densely populated regions of the U.S. in the Northeast. From AccuWeather, life-threatening nor'easter with blizzard conditions to rage from Delaware, New York City to Boston. The report says a rapidly strengthening storm will shut down much of the northeastern United States from Sunday to Monday as snow is forecast to pile up with blizzard conditions in coastal areas. How many know it got to 104 degrees this week in the continental United States? I'll get to that. Stay tuned. Next from NBC. Storm breaks snowfall record previously set by blizzard of 78 in Providence. They love this kind of headlines. Monday snowfall total made history in Providence, Rhode Island as the greatest single snowstorm on record. Wow, it has to be cold, cold, cold everywhere, doesn't it? Not so much. Well, there you have it. Everything must be fine, right? The planet can't possibly be circling the drain into total meltdown. Look at the record chemical snow in a few select locations. But what doesn't NBC mention at all? The unfolding and accelerating snow droughts all over the world, and all the blindingly fast acceleration of record warmth, day and night. Nighttime lows rising twice as fast overall as daytime highs. Let's add this, also from AccuWeather, more winter weather on the way, behind blockbuster blizzard. The report states additional chances for snow are on the way this week across the Northeast, as many will start to dig out from the blockbuster blizzard. Yes, every little wave of moisture they can manipulate over that region is being chemically nucleated, so a very light dusting of frozen material hits the surface, very slight short-term cool down, and then the heat returns. The Great Lakes also, as I've stated in previous broadcasts, being used as a moisture source for some of these quick flash freeze surface cool downs with chemical ice nucleation. And when they can take a record warm Great Lake from almost no ice to 85% ice cover in a week, you know something's radically wrong. That's a surface freeze, and below that ice, there is still water that is far too warm to be freezing. And we know this when we've seen, for example, ice on Boston Harbor in seawater. With ocean water at about 40 degrees, seawater doesn't freeze till 28.4 degrees. How do we have so much ice in places like that? When they chemically engineer with chemical ice nucleating elements, that's how. That's not nature. Search Lake Michigan ice balls to see the extreme of what the chemically nucleating elements do to the Great Lakes water. 75-pound, perfectly spherical ice balls stacked up on the shore of the lakes. They didn't fall from the sky at 75 pounds. They build up to that point when the water freezes around that chemical core. That's how it happens. Let's keep going. More lies of omission from what is claimed to be one of the largest independent news sources online. Democracy Now! From the bought and paid for so-called independent news source. Quote, a warming planet makes nor'easters and other storms more intense, climate scientist Michael Mann states. Stop there. Internationally recognized Michael Mann, of course, toes the line of official denial and climate engineering cover-up by explaining away virtually every aspect of unfolding climate cataclysm without ever making a single mention of the core component of the entire equation: global covert climate engineering operations. And for the record, no, I'm not denying the endless list of human activities that are decimating the planet. What I'm saying is this: the weather, chemical, and biological warfare being conducted in our skies is the single most destructive human activity at this point, short of nuclear cataclysm, but it doesn't outweigh all the other damaging human activities combined. Democracy Now! And Michael Mann continues with their report, speaking specifically about so-called Winter Storm Hernando, a completely engineered chemical ice-nucleated winter weather warfare event that just hit New York. Mann says, quote, this was a historic bomb cyclone. He continues, these coastal storms, these nor'easters, feed on the heat of the oceans. Whether we will see more of these storms or fewer of them is a little uncertain, Mann says, because there are a whole bunch of factors that come into that equation. Yes, Michael, so true. How about the single biggest factor of all that you won't mention? So let's stop there. First, about Mann's statement that rapidly rising ocean heat is further fueling storms. Yes, that's true. But only storms that the geoengineers allow to form. They can make or break them at will. Let's not forget the U.S. military first commenced its hurricane modification operations all the way back in 1947 with Project Cirrus. Frequency transmissions can and are manipulating atmospheric pressure zones, which is part of the process of cyclone manipulation, and patented elements like dynamite is another layer to this equation. Elements in aerosol form that are dispersed via jet aircraft over any forming cyclonic rotation. The out-of-nowhere winter storm Hernando that hit the Northeast underwent one of the most rapid intensifications on record, 40 millibars of pressure drop in 12 hours. And next, Mr. Mann, record warm oceans don't cause frozen precipitation to begin falling at temperatures far above freezing, even over the oceans. That's exactly what happened. We captured it on radar at geoengineeringwatch.org. This migrating moisture from this circulation as it got closer to the Northeast magically flashes out to frozen precipitation before it even hits land. It's stunning. There's not a so-called meteorologist that has more than a room temperature IQ that doesn't know this is going on. And about Democracy Now! And Amy Goodman, their host. I've met Mrs. Goodman twice. And when I asked Mrs. Goodman why she and Democracy Now! Never address or even mention global geoengineering operations, Goodman's response to me was this: well, at least we cover most of the truth. Consider that statement, most of the truth. No, Miss Goodman, there is no most of the truth. There's either the whole truth or something other than the truth. Did I mention that one of the primary funders for Democracy Now! Was the Ford Foundation? Yeah, that makes so much sense. Goodman knows how long her leash is. As do so many bought and paid for cowards on every side of the controller-orchestrated political divide. We are all literally living in a money printer matrix. This is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the weekly installment of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Report, the End of the World as We Know It broadcast, brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of global climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare. Quick footnote for those that truly want to help sound the alarm. Very effective climate engineering awareness-raising materials are available on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Full-color, high-quality printed materials which we pass on for less than our cost of producing and shipping. We only want to help sound the alarm. That is our mission. That is my life's mission. I live for the day when the insanity in our skies is fully exposed and halted. We also have Geoengineering Watch shirts with restock sizes and colors. We have hoodies. These are all excellent conversation starters. Moving on. From the UK Guardian, chronic ocean heating fuels staggering loss of marine life, study finds. And stop there. How many times Over how many years have I desperately tried to warn about what was and is unfolding in Earth's ocean? And yes, it's all one ocean. It's all connected. Search the term Canfield Ocean and understand how severe the situation is. If the oceans die, we die. That's simple. And they are dying by the day. Over 500 dead zones now. Fisheries are collapsing. Oceans are deoxygenating. They're stratifying. Mass marine life die-offs are occurring with increasing frequency all over the world. How long does anyone think this can continue? With us still somehow going about our lives, as if they're somehow going to magically continue as they have been. And here's another question of considerable importance. Have the so-called experts, in this case the nuclear power plant kind of experts, taken into account Earth's rapidly rising seas? Short answer, no. Total head in the sand behavior, just like the rest of the so-called experts that have participated in the never sustainable industrialized, militarized, so-called society, everything, never sustainable. So with all that in mind about the rising oceans and the nuclear experts building power plants at sea level, from the financialtimes.com, rapid UK coastal erosion throws spotlight on $40 billion nuclear power plant, 40 billion euros. The coast around Norfolk and Suffolk is one of the fastest eroding in Europe, but the disintegration has intensified in several parts in recent months, including an area very close to the new nuclear plant construction site. That doesn't sound good, does it? What about all the nuclear plants that are already built at sea level? What about the nuclear power plants with water sources that are heating up so much they no longer cool the nuclear power plant? And that's going to get worse very, very quickly. What happens when society collapses and we have 442 nuke plants with no one to maintain the cooling systems? They take about 3 decades to cold shutdown, and those plants will all go into meltdown. Fukushima times 442. That definitely doesn't sound good. So as more and more nuclear power plants, again, go full Fukushima, and as the weather terrorists continue their destruction of the entire biosphere, weather and temperature whiplash will most definitely worsen rapidly. Moving on, next headline. Here's a case in point on the weather whiplash, temperature whiplash theme. From 80s to freezing, Florida faces cold blast and growing fire danger. Let's correct this headline because it went from the 20s in Florida, then to the 80s, then back to freezing, and now the fire danger. The report states a strong cold front will end Florida's run of 80-degree heat. This is earlier in the week. A freeze threat to parts of the state and fueling heightened wildfire danger amid dry, windy conditions. Florida is drying up like much of the rest of the country because the chemical nucleation process dries up much or most of the moisture in order to create that short-term temporary toxic cool down. From the Santa Fe NewMexican.com, a serious head start on spring. New Mexico to see record high temperatures this week. A historic blizzard blankets the East Coast in snow, report states, and New Mexico's weather is on the opposite course. Temperatures in the land of enchantment this week will reach up to 25 degrees above average. That's becoming uniform in much of the Southwest right now. Again, temperatures up to 104 degrees in the U.S. this week. I'll get to that. But first, with temperatures that high in the middle of winter, consider those that are still spewing out their mind-numbingly false narratives of global cooling, or even more ludicrous, quote, coming ice age. Whatever planet they're on, it's not this one. So here's the temperatures this week. Laredo, Texas hit 103 degrees. La Puerta, Texas hit 104 degrees. And Rio Grande City also hit 104 degrees. All of this in Texas, and Arizona not far behind. Here's a side note about my Northern California wilderness mountaintop location. Before last week, not a single freezing temperature all winter. Not one. Then I wake up to a foot of fresh chemical snow, the super cold to the touch kind, the here one day and gone the next kind. And that's likely it for winter. Just enough chemically nucleated frozen material to decimate all the trees that bloomed and budded in January. And about the deciduous trees, they only went dormant in the first place because of elements the weather terrorists include in specific fall rains, after which deciduous tree leaves quickly shrivel up and die, but don't fall. These are forced dormancy chemicals, and the leaves sometimes hang on shelter trees all winter long until the new leaves come out. This isn't nature, and this single snow event is enough to convince those that don't want the truth in the first place that everything's fine. We had winter. Sure, it was only one day between the record warm temperatures on both sides of that, but that's enough to convince them everything's fine. Go back to sleep. Nothing to see here. That's a core aspect of climate engineering and their chemical cool down engineering winter weather events to further confuse and divide the populations as to the true state of damage already done to the climate, but there'll be no hiding the degree of that damage for much longer. You can quote me on that. More on meltdown from europorter.co. New computation method for climate extremes. Researchers at the University of Graz reveal tenfold increase of heat over Europe. Tenfold. Think about that. And to be clear, what this statement means is it's not 10 times hotter than it was. It's the rate of increase that has increased 10 times. So from the report, the total extremity of heat in Austria and most regions of Central and Southern Europe has increased about tenfold in the current climate period from 2010 to 2024 compared to 1961 to 1990. This has been caused by increases in both the frequency and duration of events, as well as the threshold exceedance, magnitude, and spatial extent of the events. Summary: we are free-falling into a runaway, abrupt climate collapse scenario which the climate intervention operations, aka weather, chemical, and biological warfare, are making far worse overall, not better. Short-term toxic cool downs at the cost of a worsened overall warming, and their particulate matter traps heat at night so it can't radiate back out into the atmosphere. And all of this on top of the extremely rapid buildup of greenhouse gases, and yes, that is an extremely big problem, not just CO2, and no more isn't better. That is a completely unresearched and false conclusion, but also methane, not from cow flatulence, but from the thawing and exploding methane hydrate and clathrate deposits. Please search Siberian methane craters, look at those images, and consider it's happening on the seabed, especially in the Arctic, 10 times the scale of what you can see in the Arctic tundra. Take a good look. It's exploding into the atmosphere, migrating to higher altitudes, spreading out, covering the planet like a layer of glass. And now let's add climate engineering on top of all that. That's a recipe for near-term planetary omnicide. Next, the new headline from MSM alluding to what they can no longer hide about those particles in the air from the UK Guardian. Injecting particles into the atmosphere isn't a magical fix for the climate crisis. Really, from the report, geoengineering does little to diffuse most of the risks that really matter for people, and it runs the risk of making some harms worse. The report continues, artificially adding new radiatively active particles into the atmosphere will inevitably alter the dynamics of the global atmospheric circulation, which determines regional and local weather. Stop. Let's ponder this for a moment. The Guardian admits that saturating the atmosphere with highly toxic nanoparticle filth isn't, quote, a magic solution. Really? I can't imagine why not. What could possibly go wrong with that? And the Guardian admits also that there might be a few risks. What a circus of insanity. And they don't even mention the fact that, oh yeah, the tens of millions of tons that are being sprayed into the atmosphere, it's not a might someday equation, are all settling down to the surface where every living thing gets to inhale and or absorb these toxic bioavailable and bioaccumulative particles is building up in all of us. Every single person we tested, hair, blood, urine, packed with these particles. How much longer can we keep going? Bees dying of massive aluminum exposure. Please look it up. Search bees aluminum. Why aren't the beekeepers talking about this? Why aren't governments talking about this? We're down to single-digit pollinators left, and everybody's pretending everything's going to keep going like it is indefinitely into the future. What a total delusion. And almost none yet comprehend how close we all are to paying the price of industrialized, militarized, so-called society with climate intervention operations, aka weather, chemical, and biological warfare, being the epitome of human insanity. And about the geoengineering jet aircraft that are spraying 40 to 60 million tons conservatively of highly toxic nanoparticles into global skies annually. And by the way, for those that are new to this broadcast, that figure comes from about 500 lab tests taken by the University of Minnesota over that state, extrapolating how much material was in that precipitation, projecting that globally 40 to 60 million tons of toxic nanoparticles. And not coincidentally, that figure is in very close correlation with what the so-called climate science community has recommended we do, but which they say we're not doing. It's just our imagination. We're not really seeing what we're seeing. From phys.org, let's add this. Extreme heat waves trigger unexpected nanoparticle formation in the air. Imagine that. I wonder where all those highly toxic particles of aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese, surfactants, graphene, where could it all be coming from? And what else we can't even know unless we know what we're looking for. Let's add this from chemistryworld.com. Heat waves that push up atmospheric nanoparticle levels might explain higher death tolls. You think? From that report, natural and anthropogenic organic, there's nothing organic about what's raining down through our air column, molecules can spontaneously self-assemble. Wow, that's interesting, isn't it? Into supermolecular atmospheric nanoparticles during heat waves. Research from the U.S. has shown the work which explains high levels of new particle formation during hot weather could help explain the death tolls associated with extreme heat events. So did it take a team of scientists to figure that out, that extreme heat, which climate engineering is worsening, not mitigating, and lots of inhaled toxic nanoparticles can lead to more mortality? Was that hard to figure out? Let's add this from the report. Clouds can both reflect heat to outer space and trap it, as I just mentioned, in the Earth's atmosphere, making the particles one of the most important feedbacks in climate change models and the single most uncertain. Yes, it's hard to predict exactly where and when the weather terrorists are going to dump their payloads of toxic climate engineering elements. The report then says heat combined with these ultrafine particles impacts human health. Obviously, that's like saying jumping off a 100-story building and face planting on the pavement could impact human health. Brilliant. But wait, our elected officials are going to save us from this, right? Maha, sure, they're spreading around a lot more glyphosate, but they'll clean up everything else, right? Not so much. From thehill.com, Trump loosens restrictions on toxic pollution, including mercury and lead. How about that? The move is one of a series of steps from the Trump administration to reduce environmental standards in order to bolster carbon fuels. Mercury is a neurotoxin. Yep. That's why it's in the safe and effective concoctions, right? Exposure to mercury, the report says, can cause harm to brain, heart, and kidneys. No can. It does in enough quantity. Lungs and immune system. Lead is also a neurotoxin, especially in children. Arsenic exposure can cause cancer. Maybe all the extra glyphosate will fix all of this. No, I don't think so. In fact, lest I forget to mention, again, we have synergistic toxicity in this equation. So we're all sucking up aluminum with every breath we take. We now have mercury in every breath we take. When you combine those two toxins, synergistic toxicity can increase the total toxicity by as much as 100 times. That's 10,000% worse. Think about that. Or rather, perhaps it's better to try not to think about that. That's what many people choose to do, but that's certainly not going to make the problem go away. It's up to us. We're the ones we've been waiting for. We are the only ones that can stop this, and that comes from a critical mass of awareness, and that effort will absolutely positively take all of us. But that being said, there is this caveat. Sharing and propagating any and every post from any and everyone that has anything to say about climate engineering, regardless of their underlying motives, agendas, and all too often off-base and incorrect conclusions, doesn't help our cause. Investigate before you share. Don't be like the fish that bites every shiny object dangled before it. That doesn't help our cause. Moving on. This footnote. How many have seen, when we still had enough cumulus clouds floating around to take note of, spraying over the tops of these rising convective cumulus clouds, which has the effect of completely obliterating them and the rain they would have otherwise produced? And this is becoming the norm. Don't see many convective cumulus clouds anymore. Again, the planet's cloud production processes are unraveling by the day. With that in mind, from Earth.com, UN declares Earth has entered a period of water bankruptcy that is likely impossible to reverse. This is one of the components of what I've tried to describe for so many years, that once you blow through the guardrail and you're in the Thelma and Louise moment, you can't just pump the brakes and put everything back to normal. From this report, they say the United Nations warns humanity has entered into an era that researchers call water bankruptcy. In many regions, yearly rainfall and river flows are no longer enough to meet demand. They say in response, countries are increasingly drawing down groundwater reserves that can take centuries or even millennia to refill. They will never refill without another ice age, many of those. They're non-recharge aquifers. The report says roughly 70% of major aquifers are now in decline, raising concerns that some losses may be difficult or even impossible to reverse. That's an understatement. The report points to two drivers that repeatedly show up across regions. One is expansion of agriculture and cities into arid areas. The other is global warming, which is making already dry regions even drier, while also increasing evaporation and making rainfall less reliable. That's a partial truth, but let's add this. Yes, you're going to have a much more rapid drying in areas with the warming, but the laws of physics make clear that it must rain more overall on a rapidly warming planet, not less. The atmosphere holds 7% more moisture for every degree C of warming. If it's not raining more overall, and it isn't, and yes, we have devastating deluge in other areas, that's a hallmark of geoengineering, drought deluge scenarios, but if it's not raining more overall, there's a factor we're not being told about. That factor is climate engineering and the sun-blocking particles that thwarts the evaporative cycle, that thwarts the hydrological cycle. And how big does this elephant in the sky have to be before the gutless cowards in the climate science community grow a backbone and stand up and tell the truth? What will it take? The report continues, and it links water stress to wider social instability. Yeah, of course. Let's take Iran for an example. That NATO has cut off the rainfall for 40 years, and there's many other countries in Africa and other parts of the Middle East. This is business as usual. Bring populations to their knees without those populations ever even knowing they're under assault. So in the case of Iran, 40 years of cutting off their rain, and they're doing the same thing to the U.S. I've covered this for well over a decade. Search Engineered Drought Catastrophe Target California. And that presentation I gave well over a decade ago is more accurate and valid and relevant today than the day I gave that presentation. The report says the head of Iran's Department of Environment said the water, just talked about them, right? Shortages helped create the conditions for recent violent protests in Iran. Of course it did. If you destabilize the food supply by cutting off the rain, you destabilize populations and make them much easier to agitate and topple countries and implement regime changes. And I'm not siding with Iran's culture or their government. I'm stating a fact. And the same powers that be are doing the same thing to so many parts of the U.S. What will it take for Americans to stop blindly waving their flags and consider what true patriotism actually is? It's not blind obedience to the powers that be and pretend that might makes right. That's not patriotism. Back to climate engineering. Consider that climate engineering operations are far more effective at diminishing and dispersing precipitation than even augmenting it. So again, there is much less overall rain, which again defies the laws of physics, and the precipitation that does fall, liquid or chemically frozen, is toxic, killing soil microbiome, root systems, and slowly but surely everything else, including us. So as I move on to the next headlines, keep in mind that the climate engineers can and are very effectively also manipulating surface wind flows via frequency manipulation of atmospheric pressure zones and manipulation of convection via aerosol dispersions. With that, again considered, from Vox.com, scientists have found another alarming pattern in wildfires. From that report, around the world, the conditions that brew massive blazes are syncing up. Yes, they are. Search the Engineering Wildfires section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org to learn so much more on this subject. The report continues, the extreme heat, high winds, and severe dry conditions that produce towering, fast-moving flames that advance by the acre are not just becoming more common. New research shows that these factors are increasingly arising in multiple regions at the same time, creating the conditions for simultaneous wildfires around the world. Please search and review the Engineering Wildfire section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org and search this specific title, one of our most important reports, Wildfires Serve Geoengineering Agenda. Next, same theme from AccuWeather, wildfire season could ramp up early in 2026 as drought covers over 40% of the U.S. The report says the spring weather pattern is lining up to dry fuels faster than usual in key areas, causing the wildfire risk to escalate rapidly and early. Here's what could make it spike. The report then states the U.S. is experiencing drought heading into spring, and that dryness combined with warmer than average conditions, it's record warm in so many locations, they say is setting the stage for an active start to wildfire season in parts of the country. Let's stop there. Yes, setting the stage for so many regions to take their turn to burn. The term setting the stage is the exact term I have stated for so many years to describe the climate engineering processes of preparing regions for maximum incineration. Sources of ignition are a completely separate subject and issue. What is setting the template for these regions to burn with such ferocity? And that is climate engineering. The report continues with this. Below average snowfall will also cause wildfire concerns in Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. Also California. Storms in March should help limit early season fire risk. Let's stop there. Yes, the lack of snow where it should be and the occurrence of snow where it shouldn't be. Places like Florida, Louisiana, and following the freak flash freeze chemical cool downs, record heat, record drought, and yes, firestorms. Next, same theme from Yahoo News, wind-driven fire danger to rise. Report says when fronts move through with gusty winds, it will create prime conditions for fast-moving fires. Climate engineering is so core to this equation. Please search Wildfires Serve Geoengineering Agenda. Please help us to share that video so people understand what's taking place. From AmericanForests.org, this, no trees means no rain. Climate engineering also doing its part in that equation. From that report, everyday scientists are discovering fascinating new aspects of how everything in our planet intertwines. What has been clear for a long time is that trees and forests are a great source of existing moisture through their evapotranspirative properties. Their tree sweat provides water for both surrounding vegetation and the clouds above. More from the report. A new development that is starting to gain steam in the scientific community is the theory that forests anchor and attract rainfall for their regions, instead of simply serving as a source of moisture for the air. The report then states evaporation creates low-pressure air zones by reducing the temperature of the air. This means that whatever area is evaporating more, creating a low-pressure zone by lowering air temperatures, is going to attract moisture. An unbroken forest reaching far into the mainland of the continent acts as a biotic pump, sustaining the water cycle and the direction of the moisture-laden wind as a positive feedback loop deep into the interior. Everything I just described has been totally and completely derailed, disrupted, and contaminated by climate engineering. Virtually every aspect, from atmospheric pressure zones to the moisture that forests now don't emit. And the cowards in the climate science community and so many of the environmental groups still desperately clinging to their climate engineering denial narrative. So let's summarize what I just covered. No forests, no people. Let's add more. Sterile soils, no people. Crashing crops, no people. No ozone layer, no people. Crashing fisheries, no people. Toxic everything, no people. The list goes on and on and on. Converging and cascading catastrophes, with climate engineering raging above it all. How much longer do we have short of a complete course correction? How many really want to know the answer to that question? On that upbeat note, you're listening to the weekly installment of Global Alert News, the Bad News Broadcast, installment number 551, February 28th, 2026. This is Dane Wigington, your host. Global Alert News brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate intervention operations known as geoengineering. Global Alert News is aired on a number of AM and FM stations around the country. If any radio station near you is willing to air the GAN broadcast in order to inform their listeners of what Matrix Media won't mention, have them contact us at admin@geoengineeringwatch.org. We'll grant them access to our weekly broadcast for free, of course. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News broadcast can be found on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org under the recent column and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. If you're on our email list, please put us on our email contact book so that our mailouts don't go to the spam files. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, which fully exposes the climate engineering atrocities. This is the single best, most thorough, inarguable proof of climate engineering operations. And the more we can circulate this film with testing that can't be duplicated, because no one will ever get access to that NOAA flying lab that we got access to again. Not going to happen again. We can share this video, land it in the lap of all those who need to wake up and look up. And if we can reach a critical mass of awareness, we will have a chance of exposing and halting these operations from the inside out. Best way to share: circulate the direct link to The Dimming by email directly from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Sharing directly helps us to overcome social media censorship. When viewing our YouTube of The Dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube, please subscribe, share, and comment. All of this helps us to circulate critically important data to a much wider audience about reaching those that still aren't looking up. Again, sharing the link to The Dimming It helps. Also, you can start a conversation with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials. They can be found on our homepage. Again, our only goal, provide activists what they need to move this fight forward. Extremely high-quality printed materials, shocking images, pictures worth 1,000 words. We have Geoengineering Watch hoodies, Geoengineering Watch shirts. We have scannable business cards, bumper stickers, all effective tools to help strike up a conversation on the climate engineering issue. We're going to be passing on our printed materials for less than our cost of producing and shipping. Reaching a critical mass of awareness, as I've said over and over, it's the only way forward in this fight. It is the great imperative. Please help us to share credible data from a credible source. It doesn't cost a penny to do that. From your own home computer, again, sharing a link to the dimming with all those that should then be asked why they're not addressing this issue, especially when we're talking about heads of environmental groups, agricultural groups, elected officials. The list is endless. The more we can circulate that documentary, the closer we will be to a critical mass of awareness. Every single day counts. And yes, we all feel battle fatigue. I certainly feel battle fatigue. After over 20 years, I've never abandoned my post. I've never left my post. Every single day, I am in this fight. But we must press on. And how much innocent life forms, how many innocent human beings around the world have no voice except for us, especially the flora and the fauna, the life support systems of the planet. No voice except for us. What greater point or purpose could any of us have than to fully engage in this fight for everything we hold dear? And for all those that are doing exactly that, given their individual circumstances, you have my deepest regard and respect. It is our collective efforts that can yet make a difference at this late hour. Moving on, a few snapshots from around the world. Consider and remember a hallmark of climate engineering operations are devastating drought and deadly deluge scenarios. Again, with all that in mind, first headline from UPI.com, nearly 80% of Paraguay without electricity amid heat wave. The outage affected 90% of customers of the National Electric Administration. From news.com.au, 4 years worth of rain could soak parts of central Australia this week, typically the driest part of the country. A widespread flooding risk for the region has been issued by the Board of Meteorology. From Euronews.com, France finally ends 40-day streak of consecutive rain. What happened then? Let's add this headline, also from Euronews.com. Quote, after nearly 40 consecutive days of rain, France has been experiencing an exceptional heat wave since Tuesday, breaking records for the month of February. How about that? If anybody thinks any of this is just nature, think again. And there are many agendas and objectives being carried out. For example, countries that don't go along with the narratives of controller countries that are the tail wagging the dog seem to always end up with some sort of climate cataclysm striking them over and over again, like 40 days of rain. Sounds a bit biblical, doesn't it? Is that the point? Are the gods of weather laughing it up behind closed doors as they carry out operations like this? From Politico.eu, global warming intensified a series of torrential rainstorms that battered Spain and Portugal in recent weeks. I covered this in last week's broadcast, and oh yeah, it's a coincidence that France, Spain, and Portugal are three countries that push back hard against the behavior of a certain Middle Eastern country that we're not allowed to name. I'm sure you can fill in that blank. Is it a coincidence that they all got deluged with record storms again and again and again? But wait, how could a small Middle Eastern country have that much capability over the weather? Oh yeah, they're the tail wagging the dog, which is the biggest military in the world by far. Oh, who might that be? Not hard to fill that blank in either, is it? Let's keep going, because it's not just the torrential rain that's battering these countries. From severe weather Europe, up to 59 forest fires in 24 hours in Spain. How about that? Floods in one end, incinerations in the other. From thegreekreporter.com, severe flooding along the Evros River has placed this region of Greece into a state of emergency as rising waters continue to threaten homes, farmland, and critical infrastructure. It's either devastating drought or deadly deluge, decimating populations, agriculture all over the world. Again, the crown jewel weapon of the military-industrial complex is climate engineering, the weapon with which they can, have been, and continue to bring populations to their knees without those populations ever even knowing they're under assault while simultaneously contaminating the entire planet and every breath we take. From SAISat.com, that's Indian media, sudden rains in India destroy crops and leave farmers in despair. From the UK Guardian, climate change poses financial stability risk for Africa. Africa's been bearing the brunt of climate engineering, aka weather warfare, for decades. Bring those countries to their knees, force their governments behind closed doors to allow U.S. military occupation, thus the AFRICOM organization of the U.S. military. From extremetemps.com, endless record heat in China. Also from extremetemps.com, record winter warmth in Japan. All of these countries involved in climate engineering operations, and all of them now losing control of the ball they are chasing downhill. And that's exactly what's taking place. The climate system is unraveling, and the more they double, triple, quadruple down on climate engineering, the worse it's going to get. There's much more, and this is only a sampling of the whole. Keep that in mind. From Nippon TV News Japan, record low rainfall triggers forest fire, dries up river in Japan. From trtnews.com, red alert in Indonesia as torrential rains trigger floods and landslides, either incinerations or deluge. From AP News, floods ravage southeastern Brazil and kill 46 as rescuers race to find the missing. From the UK Independent, Peru declares a state of emergency for hundreds of districts after severe rains and flooding. From extremetemps.com, record heat again in the Virgin Islands. From the ticotimes.com, sargassum buildup grows on Costa Rica, northern Caribbean coast. Caribbean everything, the sargassum is building up. It's a form of algae. It's a sign of dying oceans. Again, Canfield Ocean. Look that one up. Very dire harbinger. From WFLA.com, Florida's Alligator Alley shut down due to smoke from 24,000-acre fire. From weather.com, Florida drought is worst in 25 years. Any relief in the forecast? Question mark. That depends on what the climate engineers choose to schedule, doesn't it? It's worse in 25 years. It's far worse. They always give a date so you think it happened before, so it might not be any big deal. That's a lie. So to recap, Florida has gone from record flash freeze to record-breaking high temperatures, back to record cold, and back to record drought and firestorms. But in other regions of the South, another story is unfolding. From grist.org, hotter, wetter South is becoming a breeding ground for mold. Guess what? When you fill the atmosphere with what amounts to fungal proliferation platforms, all the tiny particulate dispersions from climate engineering jets, that's a breeding ground for mold as well. And fungal everything is ravaging the web of life right now. There are so many fungal infections on trees and forests right now. They're falling over everywhere. Root systems killing soil microbiome. And what happens when you kill beneficial microorganisms? Like when you take antibiotics in your body, fungal everything starts to proliferate. That's exactly what's happening now. The toxic rain is killing microbiome from the clouds to the ground, and what ensues? Fungal everything, along with whatever engineered pathogens the climate engineers may be including in the mix. On that note, from the LA Times, deadly bird flu found in California elephant seals for the first time. God knows what they're spraying on us at any given moment. From the IdahoStatesman.com, Idaho is in a severe snow drought. Well, if you want snow, you got to go to Florida or New Orleans. From the NationalObserver.com, Canada's creeping snow drought could become a water security risk. No could, may, might, already is. Going to get way bad in the Southwest this summer. Wait and see. From the UK Independent, a headline from the bottom of the world. Penguins dying as Antarctic ice melts too early. And for those that still don't believe the polar ice is melting because some moronic coming ice age or global cooling source or site says it isn't, please do some real research, please. The polar meltdown is so dire that we may face 1 or 2 BOEs, that's a blue ocean event, North and South Pole, as early as the coming fall for the North Pole. And if we have 1 or 2 blue ocean events, that is the end of life on Earth as we know it. The heating goes completely exponential, total meltdown, and we are hurtling toward exactly that, and it is potentially that close. From the Washington Post, North American birds are dying off faster. It signals a human crisis too. Exactly. How are we to live if the whole web of life is dying and the whole web of life is dying? Staggering statistics that far too few have yet summoned the courage to face. There's more from Earth.com. Greenland's most extreme ice melt events are getting dramatically worse. Everything is accelerating exponentially. I've said it again and again and again. This is an extremely non-linear equation. Next headline from phys.org. Greenland ice melt surges unprecedentedly amid warming. Ice melt has increased more than sixfold, and the rate is accelerating. And again, climate engineering, in the attempt to mask the severity of what's unfolding, is further fueling the overall fire and contaminating the entire biosphere every breath we take in the process. From theconversation.com, rain is coming to Antarctica. Here's how it will change the frozen continent. This is not good, raining in Antarctica, and most don't understand the implications. The report says meltwater ponding has been implicated in the collapse of the Larsen A and B ice shelves. That destabilizes the land-based ice. The ice shelves are the cleat that holds back the ice, and once the water goes through moulins, which is a drain hole in the ice sheets, it lubricates the rock below the glacier. Glacier begins to slide even faster. Next headline from phys.org. Antarctic warming is altering atmospheric stability. Stop there. What other component in this equation are the cowardly climate science community not mentioning at all? Climate engineering everything, from the ionosphere heater, weapons of mass destruction. There's a monstrous one in Antarctica, by the way. It's not just HAARP in Alaska, and there's many more around the globe. The constant atmospheric saturation of these toxic elements, and they say nothing about any of it. Tell the whole truth, or don't say anything at all. From Yahoo News, more than 500 dead zones have already been identified in the oceans. How many years have I stated that was a growing number? Global warming and excess nutrients are reducing oxygen and threatening fish and ecosystems. So is climate engineering, which is destroying the ozone layer, which is raining down deadly UV radiation on plankton populations, the foundation for life on Earth that has to feed in the upper layers of the water column. They're being fried, and none of that mentioned. None of it. And the report then says, what is most worrying, that many of these regions, the dead zones, don't have a single factory dumping of pollution as the sole cause. The phenomenon is complex and global. Yes, it is. Oceans die, we die. From phys.org, this ocean warming drives a nearly 20% annual decline in fish biomass, research confirms. That definitely doesn't sound good, does it? Again, oceans die, we die. The forest has always been my cathedral, my sanctuary, and over the course of years, before fully focusing on the battle to expose and halt climate engineering operations, I toiled for years in the effort to restore forests that were damaged by highly destructive logging. I personally ran in the field 6 major habitat restoration projects, 3 state programs, and 3 federal. I've bled, sweat, and at times cried, desperately trying to save forest lands. But how was I to continue that effort, knowing what was taking place in our skies, knowing it was an extremely near-term existential threat? For a first-hand look at the state of our forests, search and view some of these short videos on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org in the Into the Wild section. There are videos of my solo treks into the wilderness to monitor the dramatic die-off that's taking place there. Sadly, so few yet understand the gravity, immediacy, and totality of what's unfolding. All of us are needed in the battle to expose what's taking place in our skies. Reaching a critical mass of awareness is the only way forward in this fight. We're playing chess. We need to learn how to play well, effectively, efficiently, and accurately. On that note, more and more opportunists are stepping out of the shadows and attempting to capitalize off of the anti-climate engineering fight. It would seem they want you to send them your money. Well, in a very roundabout way, saying that once they have your donations, they'll try to figure out some sort of strategy without any tangible testing, without any consequential expert witnesses, or any viable specific legal plan of action. Further, the same tin cup rattling, send us your money panderers are inevitably working with Trojan horse online sources and individuals that pretend to be fighting climate engineering while simultaneously denying climate engineering, ultimately claiming it's all just jet exhaust. And yet again, in some cases, bottom-feeding opportunists are using geoengineeringwatch.org posts and images to create the impression that they are us, that they have some sort of affiliation with geoengineeringwatch.org, but that's a blatant lie. We do not ever solicit anything. Other online platforms continue to pretend global climate engineering operations are just a dangerous proposal, not admitting that geoengineering is an ongoing and ever-expanding weather warfare assault for over 80 years. Such platforms also pander for donations, even as they pretend what's taking place in our skies is just a proposal. Bottom line, Discernment is absolutely necessary. Investigation of any that are making claims and asking for your money without any track record whatsoever in this fight should be a glaring red flag. It costs nothing to share credible data from a credible source. For example, forwarding a link to the Dimming documentary to the endless list of those that should be asked to explain why they are not addressing this most dire issue. Environmental report authors, media, farm groups, elected officials, the list is endless. Doing all this costs nothing and can do more than anything else to start desperately needed spot fires of awareness that will then grow and spread. So, about Trojan horses, the ongoing shocker. This is an ongoing story and a doubling down scenario of the same. From thehill.com, Kennedy doubles down on defense of Trump glyphosate order amid Maha backlash. Anyone that thinks the current cast of comic book characters is going to do anything but double and triple and quadruple down on the climate engineering weather warfare operations, time to wake up. Every single administration has expanded the climate engineering assault, and the current administration more than any other by far. In fact, they are gutting every single means and method we have of tracking these operations, along with gutting environmental everything across the board. Yeah, make America healthy again, make America great again. Rule over the ashes. The circus of insanity sideshows continue to be ramped up in order to distract, divide, and polarize populations, all of which blinds them from seeing the oncoming tidal wave of total collapse that's looming ever larger above our collective heads. How many are, even now, especially now, clinging to deep denial and magic solutions? The following comment was recently sent to us at geoengineeringwatch.org. Quote, "We need to stop the doom and gloom and start speaking about solutions." Let's ponder this. First, newsflash, there are no magic solutions in this equation, but there are essential actions that can and must be taken by anyone that claims to care. On every single broadcast, I reference the activist suggestions section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org, and I wonder, has the commenter I just mentioned ever taken a single step to help move this fight forward, or just criticized from the sidelines? Far too many humans ignore threats until they become undeniable due to a mix of evolutionary wiring, cognitive biases, and psychological defense mechanisms. The human brain, for most, prioritizes immediate, tangible dangers over long-term risks, all too often falling prey to optimism bias, to normalcy bias, and to social conformity leanings, leading to inaction until the danger becomes impossible to ignore, until the danger is literally kicking in the front door, and that time is now. Cognitive bias and normalcy bias, humans tend to assume the future will look like the past, believing that because a catastrophe hasn't happened yet, it won't happen now. Optimism bias and normalcy bias. And then there are the so-called experts that are now giving up without ever lifting a finger to help in the battle to expose and halt climate engineering. They have only played the part of a cowardly denial, a cowardly criminal cover-up. Let's rewind to this 2025 headline from politics.ca. Quote, "It's too late. David Suzuki says the fight against climate change is lost," end quote from that headline. Some 10 years ago, Suzuki was handed a full package of geoengineeringwatch.org data. He has never said a single word about the issue and about the unfolding and accelerating global mass extinction, which will very soon include us, short of a complete course correction. From Carl Sagan, this quote, "Extinction is the rule, survival is the exception." Moving on, this question, how many in the highest circles of government does the following definition apply to? Listen carefully. Malignant narcissism is a severe, unregulated form of narcissistic personality disorder, that's NPD, blended with antisocial, sadistic, and paranoid behaviors, characterized by extreme arrogance, a need for control, and a lack of empathy. These individuals actively seek to destroy others' reputations and feel superior. They are considered dangerous due to their capacity for vindictiveness, cruel manipulation, and volatile aggressive behavior. Does all of that ring any bells? And for the record, the top levels of government are most definitely the puppets of those who rule from behind the curtain, aka the money printers. And about this week's speech from the current occupant of the White House. From the collapse of industrial civilization, the State of the Union is an oligarch's paradise. Welcome to the orbiting asylum. The president told us the story of America from a teleprompter the size of a drive-in movie screen. The chamber was packed with donors, lobbyists, generals, professional Christians, and a carefully curated scattering of regular people brought in as human props, each one a tragic antidote waiting to be weaponized against their own class. He spoke of greatness and revival, of the most powerful economy in the history of the world, end quote, as if the country were not a hollowed-out shopping mall whose last three tenants are a police recruitment kiosk, a payday lender, and a church patriotism pop-up shop selling T-shirts printed with crosses, rifles, and the word freedom. We are told we live in a democracy, but the numbers disagree. For decades, political scientists have been politely clearing their throats and saying that ordinary citizens' preferences don't matter in any statistically measurable way, that policy responds almost exclusively to the desires of the economic elites and organized business interests. Half the country, meanwhile, is living on buy now, pay later plans for groceries. He assured you that everything is fine, except that it isn't. The conclusion, translated from academic politeness, is simple. You don't live in a democracy. You live in a shareholders' meeting disguised as one. In practice, this means that if a policy improves life for the bottom 80%, but annoys a Fortune 500 CEO, it's a radical proposal that lacks bipartisan support. Conversely, if a policy squeezes the bottom 80%, but nudges the S&P 500 upward for the length of a cable news segment, it's considered, quote, responsible governance and, quote, pro-growth reform. If an idea involves taxing unrealized capital gains on billionaires, it's considered class warfare. If an idea involves cutting food aid for children, it's just a hard choice. The true state of the union is this: the ruling class no longer pretends to be embarrassed by any of this. They've taken off the mask. They've discovered that nothing bad happens to them when they do, and they're now experimenting with how grotesque they can become before total collapse of everything everywhere all at once. So much seems so permanent to so many, but such a conclusion couldn't be further from the truth. Mega cities will, sooner than almost any can yet imagine, be silent monuments of mass mortality. Wait and see. A recent survey of public concerns listed economy, jobs, inflation, elections, etc., but absolutely zero even mentioned about any public concern for the tidal wave of converging, extremely near-term existential threats that's looming large over our collective heads. This reminder: for almost 2 decades, I've desperately tried to warn about end-of-days controller desperation, that once biosphere collapse beats them to the proverbial intersection, their desperation would go exponential. Pathogen release, false flag events, and global conflict. 3 of their primary cards, as I have made mention of so many times. Far too many have been programmed from birth to reject, ignore, and completely deny any information that doesn't have the happy ending they wanted. Far too many maintain their consciousness primarily in the past or in the future. Neither exist. There is only the now. And about the power of now, unless you stay present in the current moment, in the now, you'll continue to be manipulated by mind programming, not your underlying consciousness. Programming and conditioning, aka the scripts in our minds that we learned so long ago, can, and all too often do, completely dictate our thinking and our behavior. We may be free of it for brief intervals, but seldom for long. This is especially true when things go wrong, or when the story of our life that we imagined would be is clearly not what is going to be. At such challenging moments, conditioned reactions become involuntary. They become automatic and predictable, fueled by the one basic emotion that underlies the mind-identified state of consciousness, deeply rooted fear. But fear can absolutely be overcome and conquered by courage. As I stated in last week's broadcast, courage is not the absence of fear. It's the inner strength to fully utilize our God-given will toward the good of the whole, in spite of fear. No matter what anyone else around you does or doesn't do, no matter how insane the world is, no matter how dark the horizon appears to be, no one can take your God-given will from you. No one can stop you from doing your best to do what you know is right and what you know is necessary, even at this late hour. Fully exposing and halting what's taking place in our skies is the first and most important leap we can collectively make in the right direction. And that effort will take all of us. Check the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for specific instructions on how you can make your voice heard. Please make every day count. Time is not on our side. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.